Welcome back. You're still watching Inside Politics on KTN News, and you can get interactive with us at KTN News KE is our Twitter handle. Use the hashtag Inside Politics. My Twitter handle is at Fred Indimuli. Now, once again, President Uhuru Kenyatta finds himself on a collision course with the judiciary, the latest being the tiff on the appointment of judges. Last week, the High Court ordered the president to actualize the appointment and swearing in of 6 judges, failure to which the 6 will be assumed to have taken their positions in 14 days' time. And for that to happen, of course, they have to be sworn in, and that means that probably the Chief Justice will conduct that session. Whether or not that is a proper way to go about it is a matter for debate, and that is a discussion we want to have right now. I'm still in studio with Roslyn Obala, political editor at The Standard, Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst, and Ishmael Nyaribo, advocate of the High Court, is joining us via Zoom. We're still yet to see Bwana Kipchumba Karori, political analyst and also advocate of the High Court. We are hoping is on his way to take part in this conversation as well. So let's start from there. Do you believe that the order by the High Court has now effectively fixed the president into a corner? Dismas, let's start with you.
Well, you know, under normal circumstances, every single Kenyan is supposed to obey court orders. And if you are unhappy, then you go to the Superior Court. But for the matter in conversation, the president has expressed these reservations times above number that he's not going to appoint the named judges. And he has failed to give reasons so that members of the public can appreciate the president's thinking. And I can almost predict that he's going to ignore the court orders once more, so that by the lapse of 14 days, then those judges will be deemed as having been appointed. But in my view, what the president ought to have done is to let Kenyans know his thinking, so that we can appreciate where he's coming from. But a failure to do that, he has exposed these judges to character assassination, because now for ordinary members of the public, they seem to think that there's a stain with these judges. So in my view, really, the president should have moved fast and disclose these reasons, or go ahead and appoint them, and then we have tribunals investigating the conduct. So in my view, that is the first level. Then the second level, obviously, looking at the way the courts, the High Court and the Court of Appeal has been making orders and negating the president's projects, we go to the germane issue as to whether or not the president has got solid advisors, and if they are solid, whether or not the president listens to advice. Because it's very embarrassing that every single day, every single initiative that President Kenyatta has put forward to Kenya, you know, be it Huduma, be it BBI, be it the judges, all these kind of things, eventually when they land at the High Court or Court of Appeal, they are negated for errors of both commission and omission. So one begins to wonder whether, in fact, the president has got advisors who have a capacity, both at the office of the president and at the State House, and if they give him advice, whether or not he listens. And you know, you can easily compare the administration of President Kenyatta, and you compare with Kibaki, and you compare with Moi. But you know, the one for Kibaki makes a lot more sense, because then it was under the new constitution. The only time you had decisions or efforts made by President Kibaki being reversed was towards the tail end, and I recall the appointment of some judges when Raila Odinga said no, and you know, those things were negated. But now when you are President Kenyatta, you're supposed to have a top capacity, you're keeping the company of very solid advisors, and everything you do is negated. And when the High Courts have pronounced themselves, or the Court of Appeal, then members of your cabinet and other politicians go to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, and they go to the top of Mount Kenya, and they begin casting aspersions on those judges. That is unacceptable. And in my view, we must then give a pat on the back of these judges for exercising their decisional independence and institutional independence, but with one caveat, that they must know they're not elected, they've not been elected by anybody. They've gotten into office through the Judicial Service Commission, and we hope they're not using the Pakistani judiciary as a best practice.
Okay, and we will shortly go to the lawyer Ishmael Nyaribo for some legal interpretation. But before that, Roslyn Obala, There's something to be said about the legal advice that the president is receiving, as mentioned by Dismas Mukua. The president picked one top judge from the judiciary as his chief legal advisor. That's Paul Kihara Kariuki. The Attorney General has already indicated that he has already filed notice of appeal in this issue. That means they will file the appeal this coming week. What can be said about the kind of legal advice the president is receiving, because this is almost, for lack of a better word, embarrassing to the president?
Fred, Dismas has just touched it and said that the president can take the legal advice he's given or he can disregard it. But in this case, just as you have said, that it's a bit embarrassing that the executive has lost quite a number of cases at the courts. That means that either the advice he's getting is not good, or they're just deciding to ignore whatever the law says. Because this is not the first time that we are seeing the executive coming on against the judiciary. If you look at the Constitution, these three arms of government, that is the executive, judiciary, and the legislature, are distinct but intertwined. So it means that they need to work in tandem and ensure that none encroaches on the turf of the other. We have seen since the nullification of the 2017 presidential elections, there was a conversation about the revisiting. And since then, we have seen it's like the judiciary and the executive are in a tug of war, where at some point even the president said that he's not able to execute his election agenda because almost everything is put on hold by the judiciary. And now when it comes to this issue of the judges, I think this is where now the president finds himself in a very big dilemma. Because remember, he had said he had issues on these judges. The court has pronounced itself and said within 14 days, if this doesn't happen, then these judges are supposed to be sworn in. Yes, the Attorney General has said he has already issued a notice to appeal, but where does it put the president? This is not the first time that we saw a judge, the executive and also parliament coming against a judge. You remember when Justice Wasame was supposed to be sworn in to go back to JSC. Again, there was a standoff to the extent that it forced the Chief Justice to step in and do what the court had said. So I think we are facing two issues here. There is the issue of not obeying the court orders, and also the issue that either the executive has deliberately decided not to follow the law, or they decided that it is their way or no way. Okay. And I think that was the fears of retired Justice David Maraga and also retired Justice Willy Mutunga.
And Bwana Ishmael Nyaribo Wakili, there are issues of law here, issues of constitutional interpretation. The fact that if at all the 14 days lapse and therefore the judges are assumed to have assumed office, automatically they will still have to be sworn into office, which according to the law and according to the understanding that we have, that is the prerogative of the president. The same way it is the Chief Justice or a very senior judge who has to swear in the president. Now, when we see the possibility of the Chief Justice swearing in judges, don't you think that that presents a very big problem to the country?
Yeah, there are so many issues, Fred, you have raised. Before I misunderstood, I want to make an opening statement that says obedience to court orders and obedience to the Constitution and the laws of the country is paramount and not challengeable by anybody. Anyone ordered to do something by the High Court or the Court of Appeal or the Magistrates Court must obey that order. Having said this, I want to assess the situation you have presented and the complex scenario arising from this order, from this judgment. Remember, the Chief Justice and the Judicial Service Commission opposed this particular petition by Katiba Institute. Therefore, in the list, Chief Justice is conflicted by this judgment. I mean, the Chief Justice has been ordered to take any necessary steps to swear in the judges. But she has opposed this particular matter in court. And now she has lost at the High Court. And she has been directed to ensure that she uses her office to swear in the judges in event that the 6 judges are not sworn in by the president in 14 days. Now, the procedure, the process of actually going to swear in the judges means they have to be gazetted. And for them to be gazetted, names have to be presented to the same executive, because the government printer is not just a moving vehicle. It is directed and managed by the executive, by the president's office. So this is the kind of hardship we find ourselves in. Fred, if you ask me, the nobleness of a judgment is contained in the way it will be implemented to resolve an issue with finality, not to create more hardships. And we see all these kind of judgments. Sometimes a case is actually finalized, and the judgment itself presents a new case, presents a complete complex issue on how the judges expect that judgment to be observed, which calls upon our judges to go beyond just stipulating what is academic, but render the judgment a facilitative mechanism, so that it's in such a way that actually anybody reading it can expressly find that, yes, this is what I need to do, and this is not what I need to do. Anyway, having said that, Fred, you know, this matter has been appealed by the Attorney General of the country. So definitely it will again be argued. I'm sure he will stay this judgment in the Court of Appeal for a while the Court of Appeal decides whether really this particular judgment should be abided by. I want to go further and mention this, Fred. Fred, this judicial activism is likely to make a certain group of judges to be seen as though they belong to a club bent to attack leadership just for the sake of attacking it. Why do I say this? I mean, just the other day, we have lawyers who have gone to court to say there's a judge who probably was involved in a certain murder, you know. Where is the earth-scratching judgment about such a matter? Fred, you know that we have an issue about the gender rule in this country. It has not been resolved until today. Do we have an earth-scratching judgment from the High Court or Court of Appeal that can compel the Parliament and the executive to ensure that the 2/3 gender rule is obeyed by every institution? Do we have it? We don't have it. So this kind of sweeping judgment against the head of state and making Uhuru Kenyatta appear like he's the main issue at law school is actually going to render a certain group of judges to belong to a club, to have a tag of you must hit hard on the head of state so that it appears you are really making a point as a judge. This is not correct. For posterity purposes, for future, this is not correct. I mean, there has to be a way that a judgment, once it has been made, Fred, it can be obeyed with ease.
Yes, and that's up to the courts to ensure that whatever judgment they pass is something that can actually be enforced and implemented. But the president has had this, let me call it a rough relationship with the judiciary for quite a while now. CJ Maraga and the president could not see eye to eye. In fact, there were times even when the judiciary complained that because of this antagonism, they were not getting the kind of budgetary allocation they needed. And with the change or with the transition to a new Chief Justice, the hope was that at least that relationship will change for the better. Dismas, do you think there's an opportunity for this, or do you think it could actually get worse, if at all? The AG does not go ahead and appeal this, and the 14 days lapse, and the Chief Justice Martha Koome decides, I'm going to swear in the judges. Then where does that leave the relationship between the CJ and the new CJ and the president?
Well, in my view, what is supposed to happen when you are looking at these three organs is for the president, the two heads of the legislature, the Speaker of the National Assembly and Senate, and the Chief Justice, all of them to realize that in fact they are working for our national interest and they are working for our public interest, that it does not make sense for them to pull in multiple directions. In every single decision taken by the president, the two speakers, and the Chief Justice, they must bear in mind that it's supposed to serve the interest of the citizens, the interest of morale. So when you have people, trying to manage their egos and they take decisions because there's some sort of competition, that one does not augur well for our nation, because, there will be unnecessary conflict. And for President Kenyatta, it seems that he started washing off his hands on many issues on his plate and, sliding them to the next president. Like, for instance, on the issue of the maritime, he indicated, I'm going to hand over Kenya the way he got it from President Kibaki. So it means the next president is going to be dealing with this issue. And then for these 6 judges, I mean, the Attorney General is going to appeal. The matter will go to the Court of Appeal. I don't think it's going to be treated as urgent. It's probably going to be reviewed and settled long after President Kenyatta has gone into retirement. But the question we must be asking ourselves is, what kind of president are we creating in the nation? To an extent, I agree with Lawyer Ishmael Nyaribo that it means the next president of the Republic of Kenya, before he takes any decision on a daily basis, he may need to get a clearance from the judiciary that this is what we are going to do. In my view, when you've been elected by so many Kenyans, majority of Kenyans, then you need to do your work, provided it's within the Constitution. There must be no second guessing. And also for the National Assembly and the Senate to do their work. So this group of judges who seem that they've got personal issues they want to settle with the president, I think they need to look at the global picture and give those orders which are going to be enforced or which can be settled. But at the end of the day, we must encourage each arm of the government to know that they're working in the best interest of Mora, and everything must be done according to the Constitution. Okay. So people shouldn't go there to start, chest stamping or managing or rather trying to flex their muscles. And at the end of the day, who suffers? It's the citizen. Okay.
And Rosaline, I could see you disagreeing with some bits of what Dismas had said. What exactly do you disagree with?
Dismas is talking about this issue of judicial activism and saying that the next president, when he assumes office or she assumes office, must actually consult the judiciary before they make any decision. I think the Constitution is very clear, and it has domiciled various institutions in those various arms of government to be able to undertake the agenda before actually the executive can be called in to take any other measures they do. Now, this is not the first time we are talking about this issue of judges. We discussed it in this show so many times. And the question we put across was that the Attorney General was a member of the JSC that actually interviewed the 41 judges. Now, if there were issues that were raised concerning the conduct of these judges, they were the people who were supposed to have raised these issues for the Kenyans to know that we had issues with particular judges who appeared before us. Remember, retired Chief Justice David Maraga said even the ones who were left out were not the initial judges that the executive had raised issues with. So despite the courts making pronouncements on these issues, I think the 3 arms of government need to come together and sit and see how best they can work, because all of them are working for this country. Remember in the first term of President Uhuru Kenyatta, when there were so many issues of judicial activism, where there was even the issue of Senate, Parliament, and sub judice interference of the other arms of government, there was a meeting of the 3 arms of government at Windsor Hotel, and they decided on how best to ensure that none of the arms encroach on the other. Again, we've heard the president so many times talk about the judiciary interfering. We have also had other institutions talking about the judiciary being the weakest link to fight corruption. All this, despite sitting in the chamber and making the pronouncement, we also need to have backroom conversations coming between these leaders to see how best they should not air their dirty linen in public, but still they can have a way to resolve issues to the best interest of Mora.
Okay. Wakili Nyaribo, of course, matters to do with the court judgments have to be dealt with by law. But it appears that since there's nothing that the law may not necessarily be a panacea for this situation, it's not the magic pill, that probably a little bit of politics is required, backroom discussions, as Rosaline puts it, that some of these discussions do not necessarily have to be made as pronouncements and judgments in the court of law. Because, for example, if at all the AG goes and appeals, and this matter is, the courts make a pronouncement on it again, and the president or the executive is not in agreement, then the matter moves on to the Supreme Court. Do you think that will be a solution?
No. I mean, it's not a solution. I applaud that Maraga for a long time, former Chief Justice, for a long time lamented that he was not getting the best audience with the head of state. I think this is really about leadership more than the technicalities found in any law book. How much is the judiciary administration willing not to negotiate law and the constitution, but how much are they willing to sit down with the other arms of government to put across their case? The case might be strictly law, but it's okay because there are people sitting in the executive as well as parliament who also have a background in law. But how much are they willing to do that? Or how much are they trying to stay away from mainstream leadership because they feel that they will be intoxicated by the non-lawyers and constitutional understanding. They do not understand the law and the constitution. So that is where the problem is. How ready is the head of state willing to honestly broker a deal that would make leadership become easy for everybody? How willing is the National Assembly to broker such a kind of leadership, deals? This is where the problem is. The problem is not the law. As I say, everybody must obey the law, must obey the court orders. But when certain orders are so complex that if you actually go ahead and obey them, you create a bigger vacuum. You create a bigger problem to the nation. And probably that's where the executive does not come out clearly. What is the issue with swearing in the 6 judges and then put them in a tribunal with all manner of allegations you want to put across? That is not resolved. It can be resolved if the AG, the National Assembly Speaker, the representative of the head of state, executive, and the judiciary come together and say, this is the direction we will take. We must obey the court order, but this is how we wish to implement that particular order. So there's a problem of leadership. And somebody somewhere wants to sit in a boardroom and make all decisions behind the table. This is the problem.
Okay, and a direct question, and this one is a brief one, a direct question. What could be the implication of the Chief Justice if the Chief Justice goes ahead and swears in the judges? Forget about the possible appeal by the executive. What is the possible implication of that?
Judges will start working, but the judges will draw a salary, and that salary is being given by that other arm of government. So people have to be very careful over here. If, like we said, if people want to flex their muscles and show their ego, if everybody is doing that, at the end of the day, friend, it's me and you who will suffer from the kind of justice, the quality of justice we will get in the judiciary.
Wow, that is the position we find ourselves in, with the Attorney General already filing a notice of appeal against that judgment by the High Court, ordering the President to appoint and swear in 6 judges within the next 14 days, a failure to which the judges will be deemed to have assumed office, and they'll have to be sworn in by the Chief Justice. Let's take another break. When we come back, of course, this past week, we celebrated the 58th Mashujaa Day in Kirinyaga. Major pronouncements were made. Of course, the most exciting was the lifting of the nationwide curfew, 25 billion shilling stimulus package to help businesses recover from the ravages of the COVID pandemic, plus a lot more. Also, Anne Kananu is now set to be sworn in as a substantive governor of Nairobi. What does that mean for Sonko and Nairobi going forward? That after the break.